CNN political analyst Carl Bernstein, the Pulitzer Prize-winning veteran journalist who helped break the Watergate story. It's always an honor and a pleasure to have your insight with us. Carl, what's your reaction to President Trump's assessment of Mueller's questions, calling them very easy to answer and emphasizing that he answered them, not his lawyers?
Well, they go from him to his lawyers. So what will be submitted to the special counsel will be submitted and vetted by his lawyers. So I wouldn't put too much stake in what President Trump is saying there. He's spinning something a certain way. I think that what is particularly interesting, we should not get out in front of our skis right now and speculate about where this probe is beyond what we know. He may well be getting information from the new acting attorney general, Mr. Whitaker. He wanted Whitaker in this position because Trump has been driven crazy by the fact that he does not know what's going on in Mueller's investigation. He now has in Whitaker eyes and ears, a spy, as it were, who can look into the investigation and presumably, I don't know this is a fact, but it's been suggested to me by people in the White House, that Mr. Whitaker has a way of getting back to the White House or to Mr. Trump or the lawyers and say, here is where the investigation stands from what I am able to see with this new pair of eyes, and no one in your orbit, Mr. President, has had a good look before. So that may be part of the equation.
Do you think that's where his tweets came from yesterday, then?
I can't speculate.
Yeah.
I think we need to back off the speculation. I think what's important about his tweets are to follow them from election day to the present and what we see in those tweets is a rageaholic president who is becoming unhinged day by day. Who is lashing out at anything and everything near and around him to an extent that even in this presidency we have not seen it at this level and with this kind of sustained over-the-top tenor that we have seen in the last week. And there must be some reasons for it. Now, he says here, happy being president. I have no doubt that that's the truth. He is happy and he's settled in to the job in, I think, a way that he finds somewhat comfortable. But part of that comfort is to appeal only to his base, not to the country as a whole, not to be the president of all the United States, to lash out and to govern by fear, by intimidation, by dog-whistling racist pronouncements, et cetera, and that's where we are. But what we have seen is a sustained rage such as we've never seen, and perhaps it's ending today. He seems to be in a better mood perhaps today, but you know, we're not doctors taking his temperature every day.
Well, we all can listen to what he says and take what we can from that. And so when we talk about Mueller, he talks about Mueller talking about the questions. They're easy to answer, but he also said even if there's some trickery, implying there's some I guess nefarious, intent in some fashion. And we also heard from Rudy Giuliani, according to the Washington Post, telling them, quote, that some of the questions create more issues for us legally than others. He called some questions unnecessary, irrelevant, and possible traps.
Well, I think that's right. And also in the Daily Caller interview, we see how upset Trump is at what he is being asked about, because it goes to questions of collusion or conspiracy to undermine with others our electoral process. But what we see repeatedly is the President of the United States saying there's no collusion when in fact we have no basis of knowing whether or not there is no collusion found by Mueller, nor do we think that he has any basis of knowing what Mueller has in this regard. What we can see in the last few days, though, is he seems to be unraveling. And that unraveling is taking place against huge spills of information in the, quote, collusion area, so that something perhaps has been introduced into what he is seeing and hearing up until today that has exercised him on this question. He is determined to convince his base and the rest of the Congress of the United States that there is no collusion, even if there is collusion. So we have to wait and see what's going to happen here.
He is a master of marketing, of branding, of putting out a message that seems to stick. And he also, we know, values loyalty. And so he gets rid of Jeff Sessions because he recused himself, and didn't tell him he was going to be recusing himself. He appoints Whitaker, who some have described as a loyalist. And now there's New York Times reporting that Trump's been asking people about whether the vice president, Mike Pence, is loyal to him, to which the White House says the president absolutely supports Pence and thinks he's doing an incredible job. And this comes as senior administration officials tell our Jake Tapper that, quote, in this administration, there are arsonists and there are firefighters. The president is looking to get rid of the firefighters. The more he does, the faster his administration is going to burn down. How do you think Mike Pence fits into that? Is he an arsonist or is he a firefighter?
I think when people like Jake Tapper and Maggie Haberman are hearing what they are hearing, that there's usually, back to the arson equation, there's usually fire where there's smoke. There indeed is talk about Pence initiated by the president. I think that's very clear. And nothing is a sure thing in this White House. What is less sure than anything are what the president's words mean. They mean very little in terms of truthfulness. They mean very little in terms of everything except perhaps looking at him in a kind of barometer fashion. His tone and his words, et cetera, despite what I said. But we don't know, and I don't think Trump knows, is Pence going to be on a ticket? I think it probably depends on the situation going into the election. We're a long way from 2020 and that election. And Mr. Trump is a long way from knowing what his standing is going to be among the people of the United States of America, because right now, as we saw in these elections, his standing with the people of the country has suffered in the past few weeks. He is aware of it, and that's one of the things that figures in this lashing out. He also has lashed out at the press yet again, and we have a very important decision in the CNN case, which this network rightly filed to ensure that the First Amendment obtains in the way that the press has access to the president. There's a decision today upholding the first step of that.
That's right.
But he's infuriated about that as well. So we're back to the rageaholic president.
Carl Bernstein, good to have you with us. We always appreciate your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kellyanne Conway's husband calls the Trump administration a dumpster fire. That is a quote. Hear his no-hold-barred interview next. And happening now, the House